Howdy everyone, Greg Martin, the Entrepreneur's Banker here, and on this week of Selling Your Business 360, a full circle view of your exit, we've got a really unique conversation. Jim Dunham is a professional engineer that founded Dunham Engineering, a specialty engineering company headquartered in College Station, Texas. And Jimmy grew this company and then eventually exited to Travis Tatum, his son-in-law. So we're going to be talking about how do you sell your business from one generation to the next. Well, Jimmy didn't only just sell the business, but he stayed on the business, and Travis grew that business. And a few short years later, Dunham Engineering actually sold to HMT LLC, which is a strategic buyer of the company. So in this conversation, we're going to not only be talking with Jimmy, but we're also going to be talking about Travis, not only about the transition from one family member to the next, but also how do you sit there and look and then transition or sell to a strategic partner. I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as I have learning from Jimmy and Travis.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Today we've got an amazing conversation with Jim Dunham and Travis Tatum. And what I'm so excited about this conversation is that as these entrepreneurs have gone through and they've sold and they've transitioned Dunham Engineering, their business, a couple different times. But what I think is so unique is that Jim Dunham, you founded a special engineering company here in Bryan, College Station, Texas. And then throughout the course of the business life, you actually brought in Travis, who's your son-in-law, and then transitioned the business to him. And then after Travis had kind of maintained and managed and owned the business a while, he actually transitioned the business to another company and is currently working with that company. So thank you all so much for being here today and for sharing your story with us. And I really just kind of want to jump right into it. So Jim, as you were looking at your business, when did you start the firm?
Well, I retired from the military in the early 90s, 92, and that's when I started the business. So I spent 21 years in the military, and then I looked around for what do I do next.
Yep.
And that's when I started the specialty business of elevated water tank inspection business. So then after about 20 plus years of running that business, and I was in my early 60s, mid 60s, and said, hey, I'm getting tired of climbing elevated water tanks. You know, it was fun for a while, but now it's time to do something else.
Right.
So I had made a decision mentally that I wasn't going to be climbing water tanks when I was 70.
Okay.
So that was just a number that I picked based on the number of years that I was doing it.
And then so was the plan to bring Travis in? Because you had a previous career with the CIA, and that's one of the greatest stories that I had on Active Growth Hacks, how you go from being a spook to an engineer.
Sure.
But really, so it was the plan that as Travis was going to come, that he was actually going to come and take over the business?
Absolutely, it was the plan that a family member would take over the business, because we formed the business as a subchapter S.
Okay.
But neither of my children had any interest in being an engineer or running the business. But Travis came into the family by marriage to my daughter, which is one of the better things she's done. And a highlight of that was knowing Travis, getting to see what kind of person he was. And so when he came to work for us, that was absolutely the plan. It was like an 8 to 10 year plan that we laid out on paper with milestones, with here's what your salary is this year, here's your milestone for this year.
So you had this plan. I mean, this was not a 3 years, hey, it was well thought out from day one.
It had to be, because as you said, Travis worked in the CIA. He didn't have an engineering degree. To own an engineering company in Texas, you have to be a licensed engineer. So the plan first was, Travis, do you want to be an engineer?
Do you want to go through that pain?
so there was a lot of discussion in that.
Yeah.
And he had to go to A&M and figure out, well, how do I equate my finance degree to an engineering degree so I can sit for the exam and become a licensed engineer. So we had a 10-year plan where he came on board And for 2 years, his job was go to school, get a degree.
Yep.
And then the 3rd year, we came to work for us. Okay, now you're full-time using your engineering degree. Here's your salary this year. Here's your milestone for this year. Passed the first course of the NACE Association Corrosion Engineers. 2nd year was another milestone, and a pay raise was associated with that. So it wasn't a reach this plateau and just take care of my daughter type thing. It
Right.
was a transition all the way out to 10 years so you could take over the company.
And that, because what I've heard a lot of entrepreneurs say is that their business is like another child. And so you want to make sure that your daughter was taken care of, but also that this baby, the engineering firm, was taken care of and there was a good path. So as you went through and said, okay, we're going to start actually doing the transition, so how did that, was it all in one lump sum? It's like, here's the equity and here's the value that he bought it from you? I mean, how did you even come up with the value of the company?
Well, about a year or two before we transitioned and he bought the company, we each took a course that the American Society of Civil Engineers gave, a little 1-week course. Travis and his wife, my daughter, went to Las Vegas and took the course. A couple of months later, my wife and I went to San Francisco and took the same course. Different instructor, but same basically the course.
Yep.
And then after that, we each sat down independently and looked at the books, we looked at the balance sheet, we looked at what was coming in, looked at the tax returns for the last 3 years, and these were all numbers that plugged into a formula, because engineers like formulas.
Yeah, so that's a good way of coming up with it.
It was
And
a
I
big...
hate to interrupt you, but I highly recommend going to something like that's industry specific, right? Because every industry is different with their multipliers and what different factors they use. So if you're an accounting firm, if you're an engineering firm, if you're a medical firm, it's good to go, because that's the biggest thing, right? Because it's how do you get comps, right? How do you know what these things are going for?
Especially in this world where it's not a publicly traded company
Right.
that has all of that access.
So ASCE has that data, and that's a lot of what they provide. And then they provide the formula, and you provide the data, and you get pretty close to the number.
Well, and as an engineer, it looked like something for the quadratic equation. So we felt comfortable that, well, that's got to be right.
That's got to
be the value.
Just baffle them with numbers, and if you make the numbers long enough and complicated enough, it's got to be right.
We each did our own evaluation, and he came up about 5% higher than what I was, about 5% lower, and we said, let's split the difference.
Okay.
And we split the difference, and that was the number.
Okay.
Now, I felt comfortable with that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as an owner that has poured his life into, or his second career into this company, when you came up with that number, you felt comfortable with it. I've got to ask, do you think that you would have felt the same way if you would have been selling to a non-family member? Not that he got the family discount, because he offered 5% higher than what you got, but internally, as an entrepreneur that sells the company, and they say, okay, this is what my blood, sweat, and tears is worth. Can you describe your thoughts about that?
I was glad that we came up close to each other, and I really expected it to be more like a car salesman contract, where this is a number, well, I kind of want this number, well, let's meet in the middle.
Okay, well, and maybe having that relationship and saying, knowing that you are going to sit across the table every Thanksgiving and every Christmas, knowing that we're not going to haggle over this or that, but wanting to be fair for both and to be able to have that. So not to nerd out too much onto some of the accounting and the stuff like that, but every company has receivables that come in. So you've done work and you're owed the money. Every company has payables where you owe people. So at the transition, I mean, how did you guys handle that?
It was in the formula.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when we transferred it on this day, that was it.
Okay. So that was all accounted to in that formula.
He picked up all the debt and he got all the credits.
Okay.
So, we transferred all the payables and all the receivables was part of the deal.
Okay.
And all the goodwill of the company, but then also
Mm-hmm.
all of the potential liability of the company as well.
Mm-hmm. Without going into anything specifics or anything, I definitely don't want to share anything that you're not comfortable with or is confidential. But how did the transaction happen? Was it a seller finance note? Did you get bank debt? How did you guys work through that?
I carried the note that prime plus 2, and we did the finances ourselves. We went to a little mortgage table and figured it up, and
we used an attorney to draft the SAPA, the sale and purchase agreement, and the note and the security and all that. So I mean, it was all on paper. It was all drawn up. We signed all those documents. We had a board of directors resolution and all these other things. So it was all it was not just a handshake deal. It was all laid out. All the expectations were very clear. And
it was a subchapter S, so it was involved the sale of the stock.
And so from day one, you knew that was going to happen. That's why you set it up as not necessarily to Travis.
Yes.
But you knew that a sale was going to happen, so you kind of walked through that. So how did the dynamics change after you sold? And I'm curious about two things. One, professionally, and then two, personally. You had a 10-year path, so there's probably wasn't a whole lot of change.
I didn't really see any change. I mean, you had to take off your owner hat and say, okay, I agreed with Travis that I would stay on for 3 years.
Okay.
And make sure that the clients, the customers, if they asked, knew that there was a transition and I was still here. But we didn't take out an ad in the Wall Street Journal and say Dunham Engineering has changed hands.
Yep.
We just left it in between us. Now, we had some clients that eventually said, hey, your business card says Senior Vice President. What's going on? I said, I got tired of working all the problems, and Travis, my son-in-law, is the president. They said, oh, okay. And that was the end of it. I mean, we still have same clients that are as comfortable with Travis as they were with me.
But having you there for 3+ years really made that happen.
Absolutely, and I'm in that same relationship now with my new employer, and I would encourage anybody that's looking to buy and sell a business that your key staff have to come with you. They have to be bought in. They have to be part of the deal, because however you structure your deal, whether it's a merger, acquisition, buyout, stock sale, at the end of the day, it's a partnership. You're in bed with these people for a while, and you need to be able to get along, and your goals need to be aligned, and I think that's one reason why we were so successful in ours, is that we had the same vision for taking care of customers and employees and taking care of business, and it was it all worked out. But it worked out because we'd worked together for 8 years, and we all understood what the expectations were.
So I want to go back to something that you said earlier. After the sale, Travis is the one making the shots, making the hard calls. Was that hard as an owner? Was that hard as a father-in-law, to be able to be like, okay, Travis, this is your call. I don't agree with it, but I'm gonna have to support it because this is your call.
It was not hard at all, because he was dealing with the employee problems. I need more money. I need a pay raise. He was dealing with the everyday decisions of how to make payroll, which clients to call and say, you're about 35, 40 days in arrears, kind of need some money to
That's right.
And
Get
so,
your baseball bat out.
I was more than happy to not have to deal with that.
And so there was a lot of grace that I hear that you're giving, and understanding of 20 years of you building the company and having that weightiness weigh on you, and then to transition to Travis and say, I'm going to fully trust him and everything. Travis, how much did you rely on Jim post-transaction?
A ton. I still rely on him a ton. Jim's one of my greatest mentors, and it's been this would not have been successful had Jimmy not, he said he'd stay on for 3 years, and what are we now?
I think
6
we're
or
at
7
6.
years. Yeah, we're in year 6.
We're engineers, we're not calendar people.
So, and I don't think there's any end in the immediate future here. So it would not have been successful without having him there, because I was a relatively young business owner. I had good income coming in, but I also had lots of big bills to pay, and
two grandchildren to take care of.
And two grandchildren to
That's
take
right.
care of, which Jimmy constantly reminds me that those are my two greatest
Those
accomplishments.
are the
That,
benefits.
all this business stuff, that's great, Travis, but really, what I really care about is these two grandbabies you produce.
That's so
That's
cool.
right.
So let's talk about something else that you mentioned, Travis. You talked about the staff and having your team. You didn't necessarily publicize out to your customer base that the transition was happening.
Wasn't a secret, but we didn't put a big a notice out.
But your staff, they're closer. They're seeing it every day.
Oh,
They're probably they were at least aware of the 10-year plan. So how did you communicate that to them? Was it hey, this I'm going to let you in on the secret, or let you in on the plan? When did you bring the staff in?
I don't think they were aware of the 10-year plan.
Okay.
But I guess at some point in time, we had a dinner and said, I'm going to retire in a year or two, and Travis is now the president. That was about it.
That was about it. The company was still quite small when that happened.
Half a dozen folks.
Exactly.
Okay.
So and I don't, of that group that was there, only Jimmy and one other employee are still here. So
Gotcha.
take that for what it's worth. These transitions, I don't think everybody that was at that dinner, was 100% on board with that decision. And so those people over time found other opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
But it was, everybody was, there was no coup or anything.
Right.
They
right.
just, I think anytime you have that transition, and I would counsel the people that are going through this, that you're going to have people come and go when that happens. And but
that's just part of being a leader, managing that process
Just
and not
part-
holding so tight to it.
right, exactly, and because obviously even though goals and mission and value and core values, mission and vision and core values and all that, we're very much aligned. Our leadership styles are different. We're
Yep.
different people. We have different relationships with those employees.
That's right.
So it's definitely different. Building your own team versus taking over one.
Mhm.
So, but it was successful, and
So Jimmy, throughout the sale process, was there anything that surprised you?
It surprised my wife as to why I could no longer take a big draw from the company to pay for a new
I don't know if
living-
I want to go and how that conversation went.
to pay for a new living room set. It surprised my son, who was a board of director, that we could no longer have a company meeting in Cozumel, that he was no longer on the board of directors. So,
we had payroll to make. We couldn't.
That's right.
I had a mature business
Yeah.
with my daughter and my son and my wife as the other board members, and then
Yes.
when Travis took it over, he had much greater vision for the company than I had at that time. I wanted to tone down. I wanted to go to Cozumel or have a big Christmas party. Travis wanted to build, and grow. So there was no surprise on my part other than how much I would miss, which I quickly realized that I did miss, the freedom of the checkbook,
Yeah.
just to write a check and take a draw and then make it up in the end
Yeah.
with the accountants.
But that tells me that as an entrepreneur that is looking to sell the business, there are other things that you don't necessarily think about right off the top that you need to be able to be prepared to consider. Not being able to have that draw, not being able to have the freedom of an early distribution or something like that. So let's kind of transition a little bit, and so Jimmy, you said that you had a mature business and it was meeting your objectives. But then Travis, you took over, and that's where you kind of led some growth within the company, and that actually led to an opportunity. Probably 18 months ago now, about a year, that you were your roles were reversed. You were the seller now, and so tell us a little bit about the company that you partnered with in order to acquire Dunham.
Sure. So our bought Jimmy out in 2000 and got here in 2006, 2014. Lily was born in 13, transitioned in 2013, April of 13. So and yeah, it was my vision for the company to grow, and also Jimmy was able to build his business with cash only, and now I had this big debt, and for me to pay that, and I didn't get to start I had to grow the business in order to make it worth more than what it is today. So I was very much on that path, and we were reinvesting a lot of money, we were hiring, we were advertising, we were doing a lot of things, and we were having a lot of success. We were a Aggie 100 company in 2018, I think, and we were set on a really good growth path. And then 2019, HMT HMT LLC out of the Woodlands, approached us about acquiring Dunham Engineering. And I'm sure a lot of these small business owners, you kind of cross a certain threshold, and I don't know exactly where it is, if it's $1 million a year, $3 million a year, but all of a sudden you get on people's radar, right? And you start becoming that target, and you just start getting, every week it's felt like you'd get some, random spam almost, hey, do you want to sell your business? You ever think about selling your business? And sometimes it's from brokers, sometimes it's from people that, are just looking at buying businesses. And so, it's delete, no, I'm not going to sell that. We had a couple of more serious inquiries with firms that were either local or had local branches here. And then we got this one from HMT, and it was late 2019, and we weren't looking to sell. Like I said, we're coming off our Aggie 100 win. The firm was doing well.
You're looking to keep growing.
We're looking to keep growing, exactly. And I really enjoyed my experience transitioning with Jimmy, and I completely expected to have an internal sale. I was developing good young engineers within the company. Had a couple of junior partners.
So you're playing the long game too.
Absolutely. I thought, I would really, if I, that plan was to sell the company in my 50s probably as opposed to my 40s, and retain a significant piece of it, 20-30%, and but eventually give away that majority share and have somebody else be the president and CEO and take kind of a back seat, kind of like Jimmy did over time. And I thought, hey, this is a great model. And I wanted Jimmy's job before I bought the company. I wanted Jimmy's job after I bought the company. And so he set a good bar there, it was a good role model. But so like I said, really wasn't looking to sell. But what made the HMT offer different or proposal different was they were a tank company also. And that's what
there's a lot of synergy.
A lot of synergy, exactly. They weren't a general civil engineering firm. They weren't a large conglomerate. They were in the tank business, and so the other thing that made them attractive was, of course, this proposal comes. Say, are you interested in doing this? First thing you go do, you Google them. Who are these guys?
Who is this?
And we knew of them. We competed on some projects before, and so you look at their website and their mission statement, vision statement, core values. Well, you could have taken those off and put them on the Dunham website, and they'd have been, just as appropriate. So they were all of that was very closely aligned, and so that got us to talking.
So what I hear is that, and we even talked about price and valuation and all that, but first and foremost for you, I think for both of you, culture was so important.
Culture,
taking care of your baby, taking care of your employees.
You got to take care of your employees. You got to take care of your customers, and that's just business. And if your cultures, I tell people, when they're talking about this to me, if your cultures fit, then you can get through any of the speed. It's like being married, right? If y'all are committed to each other, if your goals are aligned, there's going to be hiccups, there's going to be speed bumps, you're going to have issues. You'll work through them.
Yep.
If you're not aligned on the big picture, it doesn't matter how good the deal looks on paper, it's not going to work.
That's right. And it's specifically important because with your transition to HMT, you're working for them now, and so you're getting the benefit of being a past employee, past owner, now current employee, but at a much larger scale. So you're learning things because HMT is bigger than Dunham was.
Yes.
And so you're able to learn things as an entrepreneur. How do businesses run? Because $1 million company is one thing, a $3 million company is something else. A 10, 15, $50 million company, they're run completely different. They're not just zeros tacked on.
No, they're run completely different. And as we were growing and reaching those upper numbers, you know, it's easy to finance a small firm out of your back pocket, and that's what we'd always done. And you know, there's lots of people you can go and borrow $1,000 from, or even $100,000 from. But when you want to go borrow $1 million or $10 million, there's a small population of people with that kind of money to hand out. And so, you know, that's the other thing people say. You know, is, in order to grow, it is hard to grow as an island, right? Because you're going to take on partners in some sense.
Right.
Either they're going to be banks, or they're going to be investors, or they're going to be
Equity partners,
other equity
yeah.
partners, because you get to that point, and there's very few of us that can finance that level out of our back pocket, because your expenses just really start to grow in those, you know, the payroll and stuff like that.
So you found a partner that culturally you were
Yes.
aligned. How did the valuation process differ from, or did it differ from your transition in valuation with Jimmy?
The process itself was very similar. You know, the multipliers were the same, the earnings figures, the EBITDAs, the top lines, the bottom lines. You know, that the formula was basically the same. The big difference was the comfort level and the trust everybody had in the numbers, in the accounting, in the books, because
Okay.
Jimmy and I had the benefit of working together for 8 years. We knew the reliability of the future income. We both knew what came in, what went out, what the risks were. HMT had to do a due diligence over a much shorter period of time, and you know, that's another thing that I encourage people is you got to work with honest people. And you know, HMT has been a great partner. They've kept every promise they've made, and but at the same note, we didn't have as much of a relationship with each other. We didn't know each other, so
You didn't have a 10-year plan.
we didn't have a 10-year plan, so we had to put a lot of protections. They had to put a lot of protections in the agreement. You know, we had to put protections in the agreement. There were non-competes, and there were, you know, if you commit fraud.
So
on your
obviously
bank,
you didn't have
on your
non-compete
bank
between the two of
statements.
you. You know, was that abnormal, or were you concerned about
We
having to
didn't
sign a
have-
non-compete?
We didn't have a non-compete. The only thing, and you probably recall, you know, early on, we had I don't know if it was a signed agreement or just an understanding that if I exited this deal early, I would owe Jimmy and the company back some money for education and investment. And
Yeah, we had something, but it was more of a handshake.
that was much more of a handshake.
It's kind of like talked about it over a beer at the Dearly's type thing.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And a lot of that also
Probably completely different than you probably didn't
completely different.
didn't have a Dearly's beer with
Did not have a
HMT.
Dearly's beer. We did have a beer at the end of it all, but it was not at the Dearly's. And a lot of that probably had to do with, you know, like you alluded to, there is a personal relationship that is going to extend beyond the business relationship should the business relationship fail. So we got to make sure that we don't interfere with the personal relationship also.
So a completely different dynamic. But like, so how did you deal with some of those, the realistic, the accounting issues, the AP, the AR we talked about?
You know, at the end of the day, you've got to come to a point. We all had lawyers involved, and they've come up with these. It's their job to look at the worst case scenario, and you know, you have to say, well, yeah, if that happens, it's really gonna suck. But if we only plan for the worst case scenario, we ain't never gonna get there.
Let's keep the end in mind.
At some point, you just gotta trust that the other side's playing nice too, and everybody was, and it's been a successful merger. But yeah, having, you know, there were that was the biggest difference of working with a third party that just didn't have they didn't know me, and
you can't fault them for that.
Yeah, no,
You know,
there's
I mean,
no fault.
they're stroking a big check.
It's any time that you're dealing with an unrelated business, and no, there's no fault at all. Everybody did what they needed to do, but it it was that was, you asked what the difference in the process was. That was the difference in the process was. It wasn't necessarily better or worse.
So you didn't put out a Wall Street ad when the transition happened from Jimmy to Travis, but there was an announcement.
There was an announcement.
So
yes.
how is that different with vendors, suppliers, employees?
Exactly. So, you know, those things are tough when you're going through them because you don't know who to share the information with early on. You don't want to share it with too many people should the deal fall apart. You don't want to announce that, we're selling. And then what made it really even more complicated was we're coming into COVID during all of this. And so, you don't want to get the word out there that Dunham's struggling. They're trying to make an exit. They're trying to bail.
Even that has nothing to do with it.
Even though that has nothing to do with it.
That could be
that
the
could
narrative.
Be the narrative, exactly. So, and we weren't able to go to trade shows. We weren't able to get in front of our customers. So, people didn't see us for a year. So that definitely added complication to it. We slowly expanded the circle of trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
As we got closer and closer to a deal, and as it became more and more certain. Obviously, the owners and the partners knew about it from very, very early on. Then key staff. Then just within a matter of weeks of the sale, basically once all of the deal breakers had been settled, and there were some I's to dots and T's to cross, but we knew that there was nothing that was going to stand in the way of the deal. You share it with the staff. The biggest thing was telling customers, and because we didn't want to share it with customers until it was done.
Right.
And basically, it's done that Monday morning. That ad goes out, and Jimmy and I are on the telephone, and that's burning up the phone lines, saying, "Hey, this is what's happening. Jimmy's still here. Travis is still here. We're still Dunham Engineering.
Yep.
You're still going to get the same service you deserve and you expect from Dunham Engineering, but we did have an ownership change, and it's going to create more opportunity for our employees and this, that, and the other. But it's going to be good. But obviously, all the customers are worried.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but can I still pick up the phone and call you on your cell phone or Jimmy on your cell phone?
That's what they
or
want.
do I have to dial the call center in Houston now?
Yeah, we spent the first week, I know I called 25 older customers that had been with us for a long time and had a little paragraph that I was kind of making sure I hit each point.
Yep.
And most of them at the end of the conversation said, well, are you still there? Is Travis still there? Okay, fine. Are y'all going to do our next project? And, went on from there.
Yeah. And that just speaks volumes of the culture, not only internal, but external that you've got with your clients and everything.
The other thing that HMT, obviously HMT has talked about this a lot, how this was going to happen, and they'd been through some of these before, and they had good counsel on how to do it, and they've from early on said, look, from the outside looking in, we don't want anything to look different. We want it to look like Dunham Engineering. We want you to run around in your maroon shirts and your maroon pickup trucks. And,
That's it.
We don't want
Keep
it
going.
to look different. And they absolutely stood behind that and were supportive in whatever we needed to make that happen. And as we did implement new systems and whatnot, to allow us freedoms with those systems to service our customers as they've been serviced before.
So your field is very technical, and there is some potential liability associated with that, and you have your degrees and in the training and insurance to be able to kind of manage that. But was there any talk of either some financial or operational liabilities that you had to work through, and how did you kind of talk about that in the transition with y'all, and was that different with the transition to another larger company?
Yeah, one big thing, as with Jimmy and my purchase, it was a stock sale, so all the liabilities came with that.
Yeah.
With the HMT sale, it was an asset purchase.
Okay.
So
the stock retains any of the potential liabilities, and then you protect yourself.
Exactly, and we did. We took out insurance policies and all that. But that was one major difference. And again, because they weren't as familiar, with me and with Dunham and whatnot. So, and I think that's how a lot of unrelated party sales are structured for that reason. So that was one difference in how you structure that. But I guess.
Yeah, no, very, very much. I mean, because that's realistically, that's something that entrepreneurs have to be aware of and have to be aware of in the negotiation of the terms and the price. Because if there is potential liability out there, you can't expect a seller, or you can't expect a buyer to absorb that and not address that potential risk.
You got to price that risk, absolutely, and it does. If the there's lots of different ways to structure these deals, and some are simpler than others, and the asset purchase does simplify some parts of it. And one thing that we also liked about the deal was Dunham Engineering is still its own entity.
Yeah.
We basically operate as a wholly owned subsidiary of HMT, and we really liked that structuring of the deal.
Yeah. So let me ask you, what surprised you about the sale process?
The sale process, it ran really smoothly. The hiccups came. We tried to close the Tuesday after Memorial Day weekend. I don't recommend doing that. because
everybody's on vacation.
Nobody wants to work during Memorial Day weekend, try to get this deal across the finish line. And I don't care how prepared you are, there's going to be last minute things that come up. Yep. So it was a stressful holiday weekend. I think we went to Junction that weekend, and we were sitting in the HEB parking lot or something, and I was on the phone with trying to get this deal across the finish line and cross the T's and dot the I's. So yeah, I don't recommend that. The other surprise is your accounting cannot be good enough. Your books cannot be clean enough.
And entrepreneurs don't get into their business to do accounting, but that is so critical.
That is so critical. Your accounting, and again, like with me and Jimmy, we worked with each other enough that we know, well, yeah, that number is not right, but we know why it's not right, so that's okay. Forensic accounting, you can't do that.
No.
Everything's got to have a justification.
No handshakes.
There's no handshakes, right? And so the going through that due diligence process and that forensic accounting process, and that's my advice to business owners that are thinking about selling their business: get into your books, clean them up, understand your numbers, understand what those owner add backs are going to be, understand what those different earnings are, whether you're looking at net income or EBITDA or those whatever you're using to value,
right.
And understand what that number includes and what it doesn't include.
And how you influence it.
Right.
Because obviously as a seller, I want to have it as high as I can get it.
Right, exactly.
I'm not.
And there's decisions that you can make, and sometimes decisions that increase that number will decrease other numbers, or if you're trying to increase EBITDA, you may also increase tax liability.
Yeah. And
so there's a lot of things, and so work with your CPA on stuff like that. But that's my advice. Your books cannot be good enough for the forensic accounting exam that will come.
Well, you stole my next question about what can you tell an entrepreneur that's looking to sell. So have good books.
Have good books. Yeah. And make sure the cultures fit. I mean, make sure your values are aligned, because that's really what made our deal work from the very beginning. And again, even before the merger, there's just going to be things. And when you're negotiating these contracts, if you both know you're coming from the same place and you want to get to the same place, you'll get through those negotiations.
You'll be flexible. Work through it.
Exactly.
So, Jamie, how about you? What's your one or two words of advice to an entrepreneur that's looking to sell?
Find the right buyer that you can trust, not only to keep your company growing, but won't hurt your clients, won't break any word. Your word is your bond.
That's right. A big fat check with a promise doesn't mean a whole lot if you can't trust them.
You got to find the right buyer. Yeah. And we were early on, I was offered a couple of times to go with other firms and buy, but after I looked at it's not that I didn't trust them, but they were buying my services.
Right.
And I didn't want to do that. So, and you'll know when it's time to sell. In the bottom of your heart, you'll know when it's time to sell. When you can't put everything into it, it's time to start looking.
And that's a hard thing for an entrepreneur that has grown their baby from an idea into as great of a company as both of you guys have created, and the culture, and looking at how it has impacted your clients, your staff, your family, their families, in just the community that we live in. So, well, thank y'all so much for sharing your wisdom with us and for joining us today. I do want to make sure that everyone's aware that the opinions and everything that Jimmy, Travis, and I both talk, it is our own opinions. It is not necessarily reflective of the opinions of our companies or any affiliates or anything like that. But thank y'all so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Greg. Enjoyed it.
Holy cow, was that amazing or what? Just the amount of value and the openness which both Jimmy and Travis spoke, and the practical advice, and to say, hey, here's some things that you really need to think about as you're transitioning, not only within the family, but to a strategic buyer. It was so impactful. The three biggest value bombs that I got out of the conversation was, one, have a plan. And obviously, every entrepreneur knows this, but I think it's even more critical when you're talking about transitioning within the family, because you want to make sure that transition is successful, and you want to make sure that you can sit across from one another on Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner and still have that personal relationship outside of the business relationship. Now, it doesn't have to be a 10-year plan like Jimmy and Travis had, but there does have to be a plan to say, okay, what are you going to do? What responsibilities are you going to take over? What authority are you going to have? And it has to be a continued plan, and it has to be agreed to and worked by both parties. 2, the seller needs to 100% support the buyer post-transaction. I think Jimmy said it most amazingly, is that Travis was now dealing with a lot of the headaches and a lot of the challenges that comes with being the owner. And Jimmy had so much grace and understanding of how difficult that is, that he supported Travis 100% after the sale. And really to be able to have, especially if you are in the business still, you have to have the seller support the buyer 100%. Because if not, then that's going to create a lot of negative emotions, a lot of chaos, and your staff's not going to really know what's going on. So 2, make sure that you support the new owner 100%. And 3, culture is the biggest fit. Now, obviously, if you are selling within your own family, or you're selling to another employee or something, the culture's established and everybody agrees to the culture. But I found it really fascinating that was one of the number one things that Travis said when he was looking at HMT, is to understand that the culture of a strategic buyer is just as important, if not more important sometimes, than the dollars that you get. Having the right buyer, having the right culture is so critical. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and if you're not connected with Jimmy or Travis on LinkedIn, I know that they would love to be connected with you, and they're completely open to share their experience. Make sure that you hit like on this video if you're watching on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube. I really appreciate you investing the time in yourself and sharing the last couple minutes with me. If we're not connected on LinkedIn or Facebook, I would love to connect with you. And if you want to receive these episodes sent directly to your email every single week, hit me up on a DM, send me your email address, and I'd be more than happy to do that. I hope that you join us next week as we continue our conversation with Randy McDougall. Randy McDougall is an EOS implementer, but in his previous life and in previous jobs, he was part of the buying and selling of many strategic companies. So we're gonna look behind the curtain, so to speak, and what a strategic buyer actually looks at and is actually thinking about when they are looking at businesses to acquire. I hope that you join me next week. I hope that you've enjoyed this series. Until then, this is Greg Martin, the Entrepreneur's Banker, wishing you an amazing week.